finished my Pith Oroblanco sketchbook, I wanted to share it with you and show you what's inside. So let's get started. To begin with, this sketchbook was mostly mixed media animals, and here we have a bullfinch bird. I use reference images from places like Unsplash, Pexels, Pixabay. I have a lot of reference books for birds as well that I use, and I've also started to build up my own photo album of birds taken either in my garden or on location. Although I'm very much a beginner at that. I've started this sketchbook by pre-preparing a lot of the backgrounds with random swatches of colour. Here I've used very watered down acrylic wash because once it's dry it's not water soluble, so it won't come up when you add wet media on top. Here we have traditional gouache for the stump and the bird, and they're finished with pencil details. At this point I was predominantly using Derwent Lightfast. Here's this very sad looking, very worried looking little goldfish, and I imagine I'd be like that if I lived in a glass bowl instead of in the ocean like I should do. But this little fella is the same as before, acrylic gouache background, traditional gouache on top. I have used some watercolour because his fins are in nature very translucent. I've added on some gold watercolour, which I believe is my green leaf blueberry metallic set of handmade paints. And again, he's finished with pencil. The pencil I've used predominantly in the early pages is actually Caran d'Ache Luminance Payne's Grey when it comes to outlining the animals, because it's a really good neutral dark tone, not too blue, not too brown, and it works for giving definition really nicely. Then we have a rather obese bluebird. Poor little fella is sat on a log because he is simply too fat to fly with his pals. I think I was just focusing too much on getting it done in the half an hour lunch break I had to actually stop and think, is a bluebird normally that big? No, I mean his tummy should end about there really, shouldn't it? But nonetheless, he is a cute little fella anyway. Next we have this gloriously floppy-eared piggy on a pink background. I mean, this pink just screams piggy to me, so I think that's why I chose her as the subject for this page. I like to try and keep my backgrounds as low-key as possible so it doesn't take away from the animal subject. So we have some very simple scribbly grass in coloured pencil, some white gel pen which is quite translucent so it doesn't take too much focus, to do the daisies in the field. And again, this one is mostly gouache with only very little coloured pencil, other than I think that might be Herculaneum Red. And again, this is the Payne's Grey Luminance pencil I've already mentioned. It's perfect for these spots on the pig in this situation. Next up we have a bunny who is, now that I've come back to this and had some distance, I think he's quite cute. But I remember being unhappy because his forelegs are too short, his head is too small, his body is too big. I'm not familiar with drawing rabbits, even though I think they're absolutely adorable. I do want to paint and illustrate a lot more rabbits. This poor little bunny, I don't love as much as some of the other pieces in this sketchbook. I have this tiger giving a big old stretch, and I really love how relaxed and peaceful his face looks. I think that's a direction I want to take my work forward when it comes to animals and humans, is working on facial expressions to give more narrative rather than to just do a more or less anatomical representation of what the animal is. This little guy did really well on Instagram. People seem to love him. I suppose it's because there are so many crazy cat people out there. But yeah, I really enjoyed him. There's lots of pencil work to suggest his shaggy fur, lots of warm tones. The purple works lovely as a complement to all that yellow tone in his fur. And then there's some splashes of the gold watercolour as well, just for highlight and decoration at the end. Next we have a rather sweet sea turtle. Sometimes turtles and tortoises look to me like grumpy old men, but this guy has come off more like Crush from Finding Nemo than a grumpy old git, thankfully. I've used various brown pencils by Don't Light Fast. I think I recognise chocolate, autumn brown, and then some more like burnt sienna style tones to warm up the shell. I've used an aqua Prismacolor pencil for some highlights, and I like experimenting with colours that aren't necessarily there in reality, but also I like to think that my colour choices actually are rooted in reality, to be truthful, because I really believe that the more you look, the more you see, and the more colour you'll see even in the most plain and simple looking subjects. Talking of colour, here we have a macaw parrot, I want to say, with some nasturtium flowers. I did these inspired by a video that Katie Moody did here on YouTube of nasturtiums, where she worked using mixed media and focusing on negative space to give pop to the flowers. So I had a go at doing my own version using a reference I found myself online, and I collaged it together with this bird. I really enjoy getting the feathers just so, and I really like his coloration. It's bright and vivid, but it's not too crazy. Sometimes the more tropical birds can look like a pack of neon highlighters if you go a bit too far with the saturation, but I think this little guy worked really nicely. Next up, we have some quick studies that I did of owls in preparation for a paint along. I found myself some references and just had at it using my gouache and pencils. I think looking at the white, I think that's Posca pen. I probably wouldn't use that again, or if I did, I would smudge it out with my finger, as I think they're a little bit too prominent in these birds here. I think more successful in this owl, but in these guys, it's really drawing my eye, these white Posca marks, so I would avoid that again. But overall, I'm really happy with the anatomy of the birds. I like the postures. I like that I've tackled some full profile 3/4 and full face views. Next up, I've actually stuck these two pages together, I think after a very unsuccessful attempt at doing a gouache background. It just didn't work out, so I ended up sticking it together and moving on with my life. I think it's too short to worry too much about covering up mistakes, so please don't feel guilty if you have to do the same. This rooster is a lot of fun. I love bird feathers. They're fabulous to suggest with coloured pencils. You can get a lot of energy and make them quite dynamic with short scribbly marks, and upping the saturation on his colours just brings a bit more fun to the illustration. And yeah, I really love him. I love his pose. I love how much chickens remind me of dinosaurs as well. Back to a subject close to many people's hearts. I've got some dogs on the following pages, starting with this lovely lab to begin with. I've spent a lot more time working into the background with my coloured pencils and some gouache for the leaves and flowers, because at this point I decided that I was happy with the more spot illustrations where you literally just do the subject and pretty much ignore everything around it. But I wanted to start putting my subjects into an environment that made sense for them. So this little guy is on a walk in the woods, going through some long grasses. There's some wildflowers and some low-hanging leaves from the trees. This is actually a friend's dog called Gizmo, who inspired this picture. When I painted the background, I think I was probably thinking about water, but it wasn't a conscious decision that I was definitely going to do a water scene with it. And then when I saw Gizmo sat in this pose, I just imagined him in the middle of these waves crashing on the beach. And I've splattered some blue paint as well to give the idea of water crashing around him. In this instance, I've done my gouache and pencils, but I've also added in some oil pastel. I can see a metallic Sennelier here, and then the more tealy turquoise colours are from my higher pastels by Paul Rubens, which I highly recommend if you want to get started in oil pastels and have a good quality set without spending an absolute fortune. Here we have a German Shepherd. Again, the background is meant to be suggesting an environment. Not entirely successful, but it was worth an experiment. And here is one that I really do love. I love the energy in this piece. This golden retriever is all shaggy. I love the warm tones of yellow and burnt siennas that you can see in his fur, and how it's almost bleeding into the background, that he's radiating sunshine with this lovely swirl of yellowy orange warm tone next to him. This swoop could be another wave, it could be on a beach, or it could be another tree. Really, it's up to the viewer to make their own mind up when I do such abstract backgrounds. But I love this dog. This is one of my favourite pieces. I like how I've used a warm mid-tone brown, nothing too dark as the outline, as it fits perfectly with the warm colour of his fur. And I've only used cool darks in the shadowed areas to push them back a little further and let the light, colourful, warm tones speak for themselves. Here's another dog running and having the time of his life with a tennis ball. Oh, this little guy I did in a coffee shop. This was done in one of my local Costa coffees. I remember a little girl watching me paint in like awe with her mouth open. She was very, very young. And it was just so heartwarming. And I could see her whispering to her mum. And then they got the courage to come up and ask if they could take a look, and they had a look through my sketchbook, and it was very, very sweet, very, very lovely. And she really liked this doggy. So for the paint, I mixed up a dark tone on my palette and then added in some warmer and cooler tones to give variation in the shadows and contours of the dog. So it's come off a little bit patchy, but I really like that rough, sketchy kind of vibe. I think it suits this sort of bulldog breed dog. It matches their personality. Love how his nose came out. Drawing dogs' noses and their ears are probably my favourite parts of drawing dogs. And I've finished him with, this is a Persian grey Colour Soft pencil by Derwent, which is another favourite dark-ish tone. It's probably on the lighter side of my dark tones, but it still works really well for outlines. Next up, we have a spread which is totally different, and this is where I started apart from animal illustrations. Here we've got a series of mini landscapes that I did mostly in gouache with a little bit of pencil to finish, after sourcing some reference images of the coast, and then taping off using washi tape some areas over the pre-prepared background, which is a pink and blue acrylic wash. I did this as part of a challenge that I ran myself earlier this year, where I challenged myself to do a different medium or subject every day for 14 days. And I really like this. I'm really quite happy with how they turned out. I like the contrast and values that I've managed to get. I don't think they're too abstract, nor are they too realistic, and I think that's a sweet spot for landscape work with me. If I can get somewhere in the middle, then I'm usually happy. Here's some pages from a draw along with Katie Moody. We slapped down some acrylic paint and then went over the top with neo colours, and I think I probably used oil pastels as well to work in negative space for this deer. And then we've focused on darker tones for this guy walking on a snowy street in the dark, to try and capture a night scene. This is another spread from my 2-week drawing challenge, and this one is just gouache. It's a page of pumpkins, and I love this. Again, this is one of my lunchtime painting pieces. I sat under the stairs, as one does in my university, where the seating, I have to say, I wasn't just literally crouched underneath a stairwell, but I sat on the seating and got my headphones on so that I could block out everyone around me, pulled up some reference images of pumpkins and splish splashed away with gouache, and it was the best half-hour lunch break I'd had in a long time. Here's another spread from Katie Moody. We're working on top of, no, in fact, this one is working on water scenes. So we're trying to capture movement in the oceans, and then texture in the rocks. And of course, a lighthouse has to be present in any coastal scene. And here, we were working on top of a base of, I think that was a beige Posca pen, and this one I used acrylic paint markers, and at the time I felt like I was totally losing my mind, but by the end of it the crazy colour choices seemed to make sense, and I was really happy with the piece, and it felt like it was a bit of a turning point where I felt much more comfortable moving away from trying to replicate colour exactly as you see it in the environment, and using a bit more fantastical colours, or even a limited palette of my choosing. Next is a piece that I've done before that I'll do every now and again. The first time I tackled this was about 5 years ago, and it's this autumnal forest scene, and I'll insert a picture here showing you my original attempt done in a much smaller Hahnemuller watercolour sketchbook, but also using gouache. Again, mostly gouache, but I have used my pastels and a little bit of coloured pencil, but really very little. I used soft pastels as well to try and give a bit of perspective and push the background away. It's a lot better than my original attempt 5 years ago, but it's a really challenging scene with such vivid colours, trying to get that saturation right, and also to get a sense of depth moving through the forest. And it's an image that stays with me, and I would be happy to do it over and over again and experiment. But this was another lovely hour or so of painting. I think I did this one in the studio though, I didn't take all of my kit to work. And I just really enjoyed painting the scene and applying layer after layer until I was happy enough to stop. Another Katie Moody paint along, in fact there'll be a lot of those in the sketchbook, but these were wintry limited palettes and not using white to depict snow. This is one of my own pieces though, and this is a mixed media illustration of a wintry scene, and I have a YouTube video showing you the whole process for this on my channel, so I won't say any more about that. There is a video up in the cards to watch for the whole thing. Another Katie Moody, more wintry scenes. This one was farm themed Patreon Zoom. But of course we've got food and animals, so I'm happy straight away. I had a go at illustrating a person, which is something that I find challenging, as I normally stick with more realistic portraiture of people, but feel more comfortable doing illustrations where it with animals, which is a bit strange, but I was happy with this. I liked how loose her pinafore was, and it still suggested what she was wearing. I managed to capture just enough detail around her to see that she's picking lavender in a field, and that the background is nice and loose and abstract, so it's not overtaking the whole image. I think that's a really well balanced piece. I'm really happy with that. I also really enjoyed the apples. I love drawing apples. It's one of those things that I'll come back to time and time again. Now, this was when I was running my own Patreon, which sadly didn't last as long as I would have liked it to, but life got in the way, and I just couldn't work a full-time job and run Patreon and maintain my own mental well-being. So I'm afraid that's that for the time being. But hopefully that I'll find my way back to doing some more community-based art in the future. Here we were illustrating animals, and I wanted to show you basically how I did it, how I put together the animals we've looked at so far. So I followed the same process of blocking in the animal shapes with gouache and then adding detail with coloured pencil and some brush markers as well. I had an absolute nightmare filming this, and that's why you've got two images which are the same. So for the chow and the chicken, I lost the footage, so I did it again, and I managed to only have to do the chow twice, but I had to do the chicken 3 times because the second time I didn't press record. And then the third time I smudged it, so you can see I've used some white gouache to try and cover up the smear, and it was just a whole hot mess. So this makes me laugh when I see this spread. Another landscapey one with Katie Moody, using photographs from her trip to Rome, and then more from the same session. But yeah, highly recommend her. I think she's worth your time. So this is a farm stand, I think we did. Again, playing around with a more illustrative style. I love fruit and veg at markets and all piled up. I think it's just so visually appealing, and I love to try and capture it in my sketchbook. But I'm done with painting realistic fruit and veg. You know, I've moved on from the life studies of GCSE art, thankfully. So I'm happy to be more playful and experiment. And I like the way this is going. I like the loose watercolour, even though this sketchbook is lousy for wet media because it's so thirsty. It just sucks the moisture away straight away. But I still like how loose the beets and turnips and everything turned out, but I can still get a sense that it's a stall full of fruit and veg. And then another spread from the same session. This is a far more recent spread, and when I just finished it, I absolutely hated it. I thought it was ridiculous and cartoony, but I closed my sketchbook and walked away from it for 24 hours, came back and added a bit more using soft pastels and then splattering some paint, and I came away feeling happier. I don't feel like this is exactly the direction that I wanted to go. With an old gnarly knotty tree, but I do love them as a subject, and I see this as a stepping stone on my journey of discovering how I like to paint old ancient trees. So not 100% successful, but a useful step on the journey. Now, this spread was done on a live paint along with Omar Wynn, who is another artist that I love on social media. She is an Instagram pal of mine and has her own YouTube channel. And this spread, we painted these loose watercolour pairs to celebrate the launch of her quill brushes, which I am very excited to say I will be receiving very soon. So watch this space. Another Katie Moody spread, because clearly I am obsessed. I said on Instagram where I posted these stills that you'll never find me camping in reality, but I really love the aesthetic of it and the romance of being out in the woods next to Lake Tahoe or somewhere stunning in America. Sounds absolutely magical, but I know the reality of being freezing cold, wet and eaten alive by bugs is just more than I can bear. This spread is a page of goldfinch, which are a bird we see in our garden all the time, more so this year than ever before, actually. The contrast is coming off really weird on camera. I've done my best to colour correct it, but I think that's as good as we're going to get. And here we come to the final page. So what we have here are two birds that we've spotted over our back fence in the farmer's field behind our house. We've recently bought a pair of binoculars from Aldi in their special buys. They were ridiculously cheap, but they're surprisingly good, and we've been able to identify some of the bird species that we've seen from afar, and here we have two of them. So on the left hand side we have a kestrel, and on the right hand side we have a heron. Honestly, it was one of the reasons why we picked this house as our forever home. When we saw the back garden and the rolling fields that are right behind it with a babbling brook at the bottom, we just knew it had to be ours, and I can't say that I'm sad to have access to so many different bird species, so I can get some video and photographs to do more paintings of them in my sketchbooks moving forwards. So there we have it, one completed Pith Oroblanco sketchbook. I probably won't purchase this exact sketchbook again, although I really like the format, the size, the fact that the pages are completely square with no rounded corners, and the creamy texture, the creamy colour of the paper is really good. But the fact it's so difficult to use watercolour and wet gouache makes me not want to reach for it again. I hope you enjoyed looking through the sketchbook and that I'll see you again soon. Bye!